Hey, Made in America listeners. Whether this is your first show or you've been with us for 5 years, thank you so much for joining us. Please spread the word about what we're doing and the great things that are happening in manufacturing with somebody you know. All right, guys, thanks so much for coming on. First panel opportunity at the ACM Aerospace Alley trade show, so I really appreciate that. We really want to get into the topic today of CMMC compliance, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. So, ACM has been really well known for helping member companies address challenges in the aerospace supply chain. This is one that I think is a little bit different than things we've talked about in the past, dealing with OEMs, supply chain concerns, automation, recruiting. This is really kind of deep in the belly of the beast from an IT perspective. So what we'll do today is sort of talk about business leader standpoint, why you've decided it's time and moving on CMMC. So before we get started on that, let's do intros. So we'll start on the far end. Carleton, can you remind us name, rank, and serial number?
Sure, yeah. Hi, Ari. I'm Carleton Birk. I'm the president of Birk Manufacturing. We design and manufacture flexible heaters, sensors, and thermal systems. We've been in business for 35 years. We're located in East Lyme, Connecticut, have about 160 employees, and are in aerospace, medical, semiconductor, defense, and transportation industries.
And you, sir?
Yes, Michael Polo, president of ACMT, Advanced Composite Metal Forming in Manchester, Connecticut. Last July, we celebrated our 38th year. So we're a medium to complex sheet metal fab and composite manufacturer. We're also an FAA and a government repair depot. And we develop a lot of our own products and our own equipment as well. So
out there getting it done. So from each of you guys, what percentage, big picture, of your revenue is linked to the defense industrial base would be CMMC linked? So Michael, we'll start with you and then Carleton.
Yeah, we were, if you asked me that 3 years ago, I would have said 30%, but we're now about 55 to 60%.
On the industrial, the military side. Yep. And Carleton?
Yeah, for us, it's quickly growing. So it used to be about 15, 20%, and now I'd say about 30 to 35% of our total business.
And do you guys see, from a perspective of business always wants predictability. So when you look into the future, you look out 3 to 5 years, are you seeing the percentage of business coming from sort of the compliant needed business growing, staying the same as a percentage of your revenue?
We see ours growing. We're in a couple of programs now that are growth programs. So we see it growing.
Yeah, we see it growing as well. We're trying to be more of a solutions provider. So not just making a flexible heater and a component, but adding value and selling a whole system. So that's kind of bringing us up on the food chain and becoming from a tier 4, tier 5 supplier to a tier 3 or tier 2 supplier. So that changes some of the complexity.
So as you guys think about that from a business strategy, look, NIST of CMMC started off as NIST 800-171. It's been in the ecosystem for a while. What has made you decide to take steps to actually meet that compliance? Like from a business leadership perspective, if I'm talking to you and I'm saying, I don't know, Michael, Carleton, I'm not sure I should even get into this. What's caused you to take steps to move down the journey?
So I was on actually in a panel with a Lockheed person about 2.5 years ago and who mentioned it. And frankly, I hadn't heard of even the word, and started doing a little research. And we started on a path of realizing that this was going to be a big deal for 2025. So we took it upon ourselves initially. And then once I realized the magnitude of what this was, we started putting resources to it. And we actually changed our first MSP, and we went with another one because we felt that it needed a lot more vision and a lot more resources to it, because the way we run our business at the time, all of our military product was commingled with our commercial product, and because it was the same value streams. But we realized going through the process how that made it so much more expensive to certify. So we actually are in the process now of splitting those two and making them totally separate, so that the CUI is just on its own, not part of the whole process. Because I'm thinking that we'll do the whole thing. Not way too expensive.
Way too expensive. Yeah, I love that. So that's what we would call in the business the enclave strategy, right? Which is saying, hey, how do we manage what we need to touch CUI with so we can get it under control? What are you seeing, Carleton, on the same breath?
Yeah, so a big importance for us is, we're becoming a tier 2, tier 3 supplier. So our customers are, we heard about this a couple of years ago in some of our contracts, and it was flow downs and DFARs. And, as a third or fourth tier supplier, there really wasn't too much follow up after the initial contract. Now that we're a tier 2 and tier 3, we're seeing some of the follow up beyond the contract from some of the prime contractors asking, what is your score and has it improved? And, you said you're going to have these milestones completed on your last POAM. What is the current status? So a lot more deeper dives into, where your status is. And it's really, being driven by the customer. So that's why it's becoming more and more important for us.
So Carleton, as you're thinking about, so you're seeing it sort of start to play out. You see it in the POs, in the underlying contracts, and that's what's been sort of driving your activity on it. So when you think about getting started, right? A lot of people, the fear to get started. How do you think about taking the first steps? And what was your first step approach? And looking back on it, was it the right first step, or would you do it differently now?
So we used a third-party resource, Concept, and helped us do an initial gap assessment, and got some training from Concept. We recently were in a CMMC class through with Anna Mumford and Mark Marsoni, and it was really educational. And it is a big journey. It's very inclusive of a lot of different parts of the business, and it involves not just IT, but HR and security functions. And you're right, it's hard to really narrow down that scope for CUI. Because you could spend all day, spending an enormous amount of resources having your whole company be compliant with these regulations. But it's really, scoping that out and working with third-party vendors that have the experience and have the education. That's really helped us.
So it sounds like you started off kind of in the same theoretical concept where Michael started, which was, how do we get our arms around where on God's earth is CUI in our business? How do we get our arms around it? And how do we sort of shrink the exposure to move that thing through? So let's go to you for a second, Michael. You said, look, we got to separate. So now you've got costs associated with sort of rethinking flow inside the business. Then you got sort of IT costs. Like, there's a lot in there. So how do you think about justifying the time, energy, and investment required?
Well, the goal of this whole process is, if you don't have it in place, you will not get contracts from the federal government for a product. So knowing that, we actually, when we first started this, we went through the state funding, and we got paid by a third party to come in and do the analysis. And it was, I never, of course, me being the optimist, I always thought, okay, we got the analysis. Well, then we realized that every single thing we purchased, all of our cameras and all of our modems and all of our everything, was non-compliant. So now you got to go through that process, and then you realize that every single one of those pieces of equipment have to get replaced. And so, that was the gain of entry into this. I'm going, wait a minute, we just bought, 11 cameras around the facilities, and they're not compliant, so you got to change them out. So we went through all that, what I would say that fundamental change. Just, I would say, in the last 6 months, we've realized that, because again, I wanted to do everything and lock up the company, and realizing that you're paying, we're on, for example, we're on Outlook, government, Office 365 GOV, which is expensive. And just that alone started us realizing that you don't want to do everything, because you pay by license by user. And so little things like that add up very quickly on a monthly basis made us start going, maybe we don't want to run this way. And we just recently got in touch with, I've been asking for about a year now, our account manager at RTX Pratt, and I just got in touch with their compliance person. In fact, he came over our shop last week, because we like being that company, the supplier that's going to say, we want to work with you, we need help. And so we finally got there, which was actually a really big advantage for us as well.
What do you hear from, so that's a great question I want to pivot to, which is, what do you hear from suppliers? Are they really pushing this down? Are you hearing from them directly?
I am, my suppliers, I am incredibly nervous, because it ends, we're a tier 1, we're direct. Beyond us, when I start talking it, they're like, yeah, we'll figure it out. And the problem is, and I tell them all, once we get to a certain point, we cannot, even our all of our data cannot be filtered down below us unless you're certified. So, we're doing a lot more advocacy for our supply chain, and now we've got our largest customer on board to say we need to be doing more of that as well, because they're getting to us no problem, but the next ones down that we're using for to do our subcontracting stuff, not so good. And a lot of those are the mom and pop shops. So a lot of those are the 5 to 25 man shops. And so when I talk to them, because when I go visit, I'll talk to them and they're like, I have no idea how I'm going to fund it, because it's a true system that has to get put into place. And so they're like, I'm just going to keep making parts. Well, you can't put your head in the sand.
No, you absolutely can't. And so from where you are, Carleton, you're sort of getting a little bit of the squeeze, right? You're a little bit down from the primes up top, but you still have suppliers below you. Have you spent any time thinking about how you're going to sort of deal with that aspect?
I'm in the same boat. It makes me super nervous, and having to, flow down these requirements to our suppliers and, audit them and make sure that they're doing everything that they're, supposed to be doing. So, we've seen it a couple of years ago. We were further down in the supply chain. We kind of thought the same thing. Hey, maybe this is a flavor of the month, something we'll kind of kick the can down the road. We'll do a little initial probe to see what it's about, and then kind of, get very nervous about how we're going to implement this and kind of take a step back. But now that we're further up in the tiers and it's becoming more and more important and customers are asking it more, it's something that we are definitely investing in and doing. But I could see our suppliers having issues trying to be compliant with this for sure.
I want to add one thing. Listening to Carleton, I also from the beginning thought in my entrepreneurial way that all the smaller guys, if they don't, there'll be an acquisition, because bringing it under my umbrella, I've always thought that would be an opportunity as well. If they decide not to go forward with it, we haven't started those conversations, but that being said, we're in 2024. 2025 is only tomorrow.
Right around the corner.
Right around the corner. And we know, that is you're going to blink and you're going to be here. And then we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. And they're going to be asking why. And we're going to be going, we've been telling you, you're just not listening,
Yeah, that to me is the biggest thing. I really hope we can get the word out here that you don't want to wait till the last minute. And I think one of the things that has united the stories that both Birk and ACMT have together is taking that first step to say, okay, where are we on this journey? Let's understand the scope of what happens, and then take steps to start filling that, that gap on the journey. So when you think about, Michael, your target end date to be able to get certified, right? So that there are C3 PAOs out there. There are ways to get certified. Do you have a target date that you'd like to have the certification or at least apply to be certified?
Yeah, so our scores are finally positive, which is a big deal. We started out, I think it was negative 201 or some crazy number. And now we're like 23, which is a huge deal. And then in January, when we switch over to our secure Azure content, we'll be well into the numbers. Our goal is to by mid next year to be invested and be get certified so that we can get those third parties in. And we're working towards it. It is not inexpensive, and it's a constant focus on this.
Yeah, I agree. We'll end on that comment because it's beyond IT. But Carleton, what's your target for certification?
So we've been on our journey for a little over a year, and we are targeting a compliance and certification by the end of 2025. So we feel like we're compliant with the NIST guidelines. We've had some assessments, and we've closed some of the gaps that we've identified, and looking to have our first real C3AO3
C3PAO, it's all right.
3PAO audit sometime in 2025, and hopefully be certified by the end of the year.
That'll be great. And I look forward to seeing both on your website, CMMC Certified. That'll be really exciting. So the one thing I want to really end on here is everyone gets really tied around the axle that this is an IT problem. And it is way more than an IT problem. As much as from the IT guy standpoint, I'd love to say, throw me a check and we'll get it done. It doesn't actually work that way.
So I wonder if you could, and I think people fail to see that. And I wonder if you could just, from each of your perspectives, outside of IT, outside resources, inside resource, but outside of IT, who else have you had to muster up to actually meet the compliance of CMMC?
Well, even, we had to even start with all of our, because we have 3 buildings, and every entry place had to be locked up. And people, truck drivers that can't even come in the building anymore, and a window now that paperwork goes through, and so so our guys have to open the doors and they don't even enter. I mean, it's all these things that you didn't even realize you were doing wrong that you're now realizing, all those entryways, and then you've got all the. So we're a very technology-driven company. So a lot of our technology is the OEM that made it would remote in. That doesn't happen anymore because they're not allowed to remote in anymore because that's a security issue. So we've actually had to turn off things that we would normally do for our TPMs and our them working the issues with us, and they have to come in and they have to sign in. They have to go through our kiosk and they have to get certified, and they got to come in the building where before you could do a remote, can't do it anymore. And so every single piece of equipment and every single piece of software, we have to go through a whole rigorous program to make sure it even complies with CMMC and that it can be part of the family, because just one wire that comes in that is not secure totally messes up the whole apple cart. So we're, it's really securing the whole facility.
So when you think about the roles at ACMT that have been involved outside of IT, who are the people that are kind of driving some of this compliance stuff?
Well, I think the only ones that haven't been involved.
The shorter list.
Yeah. The only ones that haven't been involved is, I think there's. Let me think. Everyone has been involved. So yeah, everyone. There's not one, from the value stream supervisors to the operations guys to the finance people, HR, finance. Well, even the way you're hiring now, it becomes a whole new thing. We used to be able to have green card holders that work for us. Well, there's a program that we work on now where they can't even be green card holders. So, and we got to certify all those things. So every single discipline within the company has to be involved. Now, that being said, us kind of curbing it down to having a little more control internally, I think will make it a little easier pill to swallow. But all the infrastructure still has to get done the same way.
100%. What are you seeing, Carleton, on your end?
Yeah, it touches upon every part of the business, whether it be HR and a lot of awareness and communication. So new employees, what is CUI? How do we control it? Everything from supply chain management and flowing down all those requirements. Engineering is heavily involved because they're the ones that are actually dealing with the CUI. Third-party vendors coming in and just doing work within the building have to go through a sign-in procedure and different types of security functions around that. So it really kind of changes the game in a lot of different ways and across the business.
Yeah, and so two more things. From my standpoint, outside looking in a little bit, right? In some ways, inside looking out too. But the idea is a lot of the things are a lot of kind of best practices, right? Like, you think about sort of making sure you got the right people signing in, good chain of custody, knowing who's in and out of the building, making sure that your hiring practices have the appropriate levels of background check. Now, obviously, you might have to step it up a little bit, and to the point, if you've got certain programs, you can't have green card holders. But it's really about best practices. So outside of compliance, do you feel that there's a benefit to kind of applying this rigor and having people work together?
That's a really good point. I always say all these things that make us incredibly uncomfortable or difficult to do make us a much better company. And it requires much more structure. And it's also getting the whole company and all the people to understand that there's a focus to it and how important it is to really keep what we do inside these four walls inside these four walls, not talking about it outside, and all the really cool things we do that it puts a focus on it. We have all employee meetings where we always have pieces of it that we're always talking about. We're educating all the time. So to the point, one thing you did say, Ari, I want to mention is we didn't even know we were not doing some of the things that we should have been doing, right?
Right.
And it brought focus to it. So yeah, I always think of it as a positive. It makes us a better company for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It actually makes it a little bit more difficult because it's all of these controls and things that you would love to have in place across your whole business, whether it be financial data, whether it be personal data, but it really is only touching on the CUI. So how do you scope, your box into just the CUI, but not implement certain things in other areas? Because it makes sense to do that. So, how do you implement those things, but not put it in your scope so that you're having to spend resources and time and energy on the compliance piece? But so it's definitely has a lot of benefits just through different than IT.
Yeah. So last but absolutely not least is how the heck are we going to pay for all this stuff, right? And so I just actually, so as you guys I'm sure know, as part of the regulatory relationship, the ability to be secure and that level of cybersecurity, part of the compliance certification was that this was an allowable upcharge. But people have struggled. I will tell you, I just had dinner with a CEO of a business here in Connecticut, which I don't have permission to say his name live on camera, but offline I can tell you, they've started putting a CMMC charge on any order that comes through that addresses CUI, and 90% of those invoices are being paid. No questions asked. So have you guys thought about or doing anything about how you can sort of recoup some of those costs? Because look, it's not free. Now, some of it to the point, process improvements that help you maybe internal, like you're not going to capture that. But there is licensing, there's software, there is monitoring, there is logging. And so maybe if you can find a way to make up, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, that's not nothing.
No, that makes sense. We did not. So we have our account manager of our largest customer at our facility every Tuesday, and so I was asking her, contacts. We finally got a contact. That being said, we're already signing up for 2 programs with them that allow us to share lessons learned.
Yeah.
And with that will come those discussions, because it's kind of like a development program for the OEMs, who, by the way, got funded to do a lot of this stuff. The OEMs actually got funding from the federal government, and they were supposed to filter it down to the supply chain. From what I hear in Washington, D.C., that did not happen. And so we're having those kind of interesting conversations while we're getting involved in this, because that was supposed to be, according to what we've heard in Washington, the soft landing to a lot of the key suppliers. Now, they also can help with this because, again, they've got much deeper pockets than we do. So,
but to date, you haven't heard anything for
I'm going to ask the question.
You're going to ask.
Definitely
Okay.
going to ask the question.
All right. And what about you, Carleton? Have you thought about any way of recouping or getting some of this back through billings?
We've talked about it. We've kind of talked about maybe putting that in the piece price and having some of an upcharge in that regard. But there's a lot of customers that are price sensitive. So whether it be a tooling charge or a separate line item just for the CMC. Is something that we're going to maybe pursue. Yep.
Well, that ACM is well known for sharing best practices along this line. So now that I've heard someone's doing it successfully, I am committed to driving a conversation to figure out how this is. Because look, being on the tail end of this thing, trying to help people get there, I hear all the complaints about, oh, this is expensive. How does this go? And look, in my mind, there's 3 buckets. There's improved business practices, which is what we've talked about, which just helps you. Then there's sometimes businesses have underinvested in basic cybersecurity and they're carrying around business risk. They shouldn't take care of that, and CMMC holds you. Then there's the 3rd bucket, which is we're doing more than we would have to do because of that. And that 3rd bucket is a bucket that we should be getting some help on. And I'm going to be committed to finding a way to make it happen. So,
well, I want to add something. So I just met Carleton, first time, and we had a conversation. And in true ACM forum, I am now going to do business with him because what he does, I need. And I didn't even know he was in Connecticut. So, the ACM, that's what we do. And so it kind of excites me. So
that's awesome, man. Yeah. And it's a great thing to share at the show. It's a great show. If you haven't been to the show yet and you're watching this, you got to make it. It's an annual show. It's great. If you're in the aerospace supply chain and you're not an ACM member, you're crazy, get on it. We've given you a bunch of great reasons. So, Michael, Carleton, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you so much,
Ari. Really appreciate it.
You got it.
Great job.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.